We're going to get back to the State of the Union now and bring in Fox News contributor and former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. And so that hearing's underway. We will monitor that for news. Call for number one was the headline from the Wall Street Journal. The State of the Union contraction then went on to say this. President Biden devoted most of his State of the Union address on Tuesday to celebrating what he says is a long list of legislative and economic achievements, spending on social programs and public works, subsidies for computer chips, even more subsidies for green energy, and a strong labor market. But if he's done so much for America, why does most of America not seem to appreciate it? Because, Mr. Speaker, the polls show that people are in a sour mood. They don't feel like this is working for them. Did he convince anyone last night that it should?
No, look, I think this was a fantasy State of the Union. You got to hear from a guy who resides in a White House, flies on Marine One to the airport to pick up Air Force One to go to Delaware so he can bicycle every weekend. His world's fine. It's just the rest of us who are in pain. And I think what you saw last night was a speech that was totally disconnected from reality. His comments about China were on the verge of laughable. You know, we met this challenge and we did what was necessary. That's baloney. Totally dishonest. His comments about the border, totally dishonest. His attempt to attack the Republicans on Medicare and Social Security, totally dishonest. It was a breathtaking speech, and frankly, I thought the big news of the evening was Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who became a Republican star nationally with what I think may have been the best values speech by a Republican since Ronald Reagan in 1964. I've been checking with friends all morning, and they are just blown away by how she captured the real choice between normal and crazy, the degree to which Biden now, whether because he believes it or because he's intimidated, is part of the crazy. And that's what you saw last night. I mean, he just literally stood there and lied to the American people again and again. And the problem he's got is people, 72% of the American people say they're living paycheck to paycheck. So they hear this guy tell them how great it is. They're thinking, what planet is he on? The American people watched a Chinese balloon go all the way across the country. As Babylon Bee put it, the balloon got to finish its job before he shot it down. And they just look at that stuff and think, does this guy really believe any of the stuff he's saying?
Yeah. For days, in fact. I don't know if the catcalls helped or hurt the Republican cause, but that seems to be the new tone for these State of the Union addresses, whether they're coming from the right or coming from the left. I want to go back to this Twitter hearing right now. These are three high-ranking execs. They work for the company. I don't know how much they will reveal. I mean, what do you think we learned from the Hunter Biden story from 2020 when it comes to censorship between big tech, Democrats, and how far it went?
Look, I think anybody who backs up and looks at the entire forest realizes the FBI was corrupted, the Justice Department was corrupted. They then took that corruption into the high-tech companies. The high-tech companies were eager to collude with them. So was the New York Times, so was the Washington Post, so were ABC, NBC, and CBS. You go back and look at the concerted effort by the entire establishment to discredit the Hunter Biden story. The 51 intelligence officers who signed a totally false letter discrediting the Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, the effort in October to defeat Donald Trump was totally corrupt and historic and involved a total abuse of government power and an absolute violation of the Constitution. I mean, all of that, you can argue about the Election Day results. The campaign itself was clearly corrupted in October. Imagine that everybody had said, oh, the New York Post story is true. Oh, we really ought to know about the $61 million at the University of Pennsylvania, or the $20 million at the University of Delaware, or the amount of money being given to Hunter Biden, or the diamond he was given. I mean, you would have had a totally different election had the country been told the truth.
From a strategic communication standpoint, I was just saying to Bill that I think that the Republicans made a good decision, if you're thinking put their hat on, to hold this hearing this morning right after the State of the Union.
I think that's right. I have to say, by the way, the one time last night that I was glad the Republicans were so raucous was when Biden tried to lie about Medicare and Social Security. They absolutely bludgeoned him away from a message which I'm told he was going to make a major speech in Tampa this week attacking Republicans on Medicare and Social Security. I don't think he can do that now. That's the one time. The rest of the time I watched Speaker McCarthy keep going, shh, shh, trying to keep his people quiet and to be respectful.
Yeah,
By the way, you'll notice McCarthy did not tear up the speech.
Yeah, that's true.
I just want to point that out.
Yeah. He told me earlier today that his big takeaway from last night is that Joe Biden's running for a second term. And he concluded that because of the references to finish the job, that phrase from the president.
Yeah.
You concur?
Oh, yeah, I thought, I told Callista when it was over last night, I thought we now heard his thematic for 2 years now. But if you look at this morning, CBS came out with a poll this morning that is just devastating. On every question about Biden's effectiveness, he's between 25 and 29% approval. Finish the job may mean get rid of him. I'm not sure yet. If he does, look at the border thing. What he said about the border was totally hypocritical. I mean, it was astonishing to watch him stand there with millions of people flooding into the U.S. and pretend the border was okay. And I think the average American knows this. And I think the result's going to be, he's going to have a very hard time running for re-election. I think only 38% of Democrats want him to run. And candidly, I don't see how they keep Kamala Harris on the ticket. I mean, the prospect of her becoming president will make her a major issue if she's on the ticket in 24.
Well, if you're going to run for...
I would love to see... I was just going to say, I'd love to see a Sarah Huckabee Sanders versus Kamala Harris debate. I think that would be a really interesting debate.
That would be a good one, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Newt Gingrich here in Washington.
Glad to be with you.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.